Late March, early April is the most beautiful time to be in San Antonio, Texas, at least in my opinion. It's bluebonnet season and the wildflowers are in full bloom. It's like the world has been painted with a magical paintbrush. During Abode's award winning doula certification training, we take our students on a field trip, a literal field trip to LaVernia, Texas, a small community southeast of San Antonio, to play in the wildflowers and contemplate death. We are guests of a beautiful green burial site called Countryside Memorial Park, owned and operated by our guest today, Sunny Markham. Sunny describes her park as a heavenly place for an earthly body, and I couldn't agree more. There's a peacefulness and serenity that happens here, a oneness with the earth and with nature. I wish I could invite all of our listeners and viewers to witness this beautiful space firsthand. And of course, if you're in the San Antonio area or have plans to be, you're encouraged to schedule a visit. But for now, I'm excited for you all to hear about the vision and serenity of green burials from Sunny herself. Welcome to Before You Go, the official podcast of Abode Contemplative Care for the Dying. At Abode, our mission is that we live in a world where death is not feared, and we live fully until we die. And we'd like to make that happen before we go. I'm Natalie Buster, yoga, volunteer, and doula director at Abode in San Antonio, Texas. Welcome to Before You Go. Hi, Sunny.
Hello, it's so good to be here, Natalie. Thank you for inviting me.
Yes, you have been a part of Abode for quite a few years. How did you get involved with Abode in the first place?
I was a soloist at a Unity church so long ago. I was a soloist there for 2 years, and Unity, as you know, is about positive thought. And one of the people at Unity, who was a poet, he died years later after I took over the cemetery. And he died at Abode like 5 minutes after he got there. And so they called us, and yeah, we got to give him a natural burial, and it was pretty spectacular. And that was really my first taste of Abode.
Oh, and we appreciate it so much. And not only are you generous with your money, which we're incredibly grateful for, but you also are generous with your wisdom. And you have taught us and the students of our doula training program a lot about green burials. And I bet a lot of our listeners and our viewers now are kind of scratching their heads a little bit. They may not have a clear understanding of what exactly is a green burial. And, I could explain it, but I love your explanation of it and the work that you do out at Countryside Memorial Park. Can you share that with us?
I want to start out with, when it comes to traditional burial, just say no. Say no to embalming. Say no to invasive treatments done on your loved one. Say no to concrete vaults. Say no to hardwood caskets. Say no to metal. Just those are things we don't need. I mean, if we spend all of our time recycling, we do the bins and we, recycle everything we can. We even put stuff in the bins that really shouldn't be in there. But we think, what the hell? They're gonna think. No, but you know what I'm saying. And I also say, what is natural burial? Natural burial is saying yes to what we call family directed funerals. And by that, I mean, I guide the families through exactly as they envision the loved one's burial should be, or the loved one's final resting place should be. And I just pull it out of them. And I have to say that a lot of people that are, when they come to me and their loved one has died, they say, Mom, she said she wanted a natural burial. We don't know what that is. We'd never heard of that. And I just, okay, she's the matriarch and she has led the entire family to natural burial. That is the very last thing she did, and it's life changing for everyone. So people say, okay, well, how do we do this? And I will say, well, what do you envision? And they will say, well, we know we want to buy the plot, and but what do we do? Like, how do we get her there to the cemetery? Like, and I explain
Yeah.
about the
First
different
step.
I explained about the processes to do that. And I said, but you're here at the cemetery right now, so I'm going to tell you the process of selecting a plot. You all just go out to the cemetery. We've got an acre and a half. You all just go into a contemplative space and just start walking around. And this ground is going to tell you where your loved one is going to be. You don't even have to figure it out. You'll just go, oh, I'm just gonna walk around and I'm gonna know. And I go, yeah, you will. So they do. They start walking around, and I say, well, I'll follow y'all. I'll keep an eye on y'all. Y'all just walk around in peace. And I say, and when you know that spot, it's going to tell you, and you just raise your hand and you say, Sonny, come on over here and tell us if this spot is available, and I'll do it. And
How
I
cool.
know, it's
It's almost like
amazing.
a divining rod, that you kind of
Exactly.
follow the
Yes.
energy and follow
Well,
the
well said.
spirit.
Exactly. And that's exactly what they're doing, because a person's lifetime in this body is very short. But their time in the earth, I mean, as a body, I mean, they're there to nourish they're there to return to earth. They're there to nourish the trees. So we've got an acre and a half at Countryside Memorial Park. And it started out in the 1800s, in the Civil War time, when three family members were the Bell family. They were buried there, and then years passed, and the ground overgrew, the trees grew, everything was like had gone, except for the old stones, and of course the energy there. So my daughter's daddy bought the property in 1965 here in LaVernia. And one day he was walking the back 40, right, around the woods, and he stubbed his toe on an on an old tombstone. And he's like, what? And he was just so charmed by it. But time went by, and the old tombstones were certified by the Texas Historic Cemetery. It's a preservation, it's a conservation. And so, they put a big plaque up, and so he incorporated that little area and the acre and a half around it to Countryside Memorial Park. So we were incorporated in 1982. So, but we didn't really put a fence around it, around the acre and a half, till maybe 2017, something like that. But before then, it was kind of wild, and there were a few burials, not many, because he was a Dr. A.D. Zucht and a very eccentric dentist in San Antonio, and he always helped the poor. He had a great heart for the poor. And he also had a hot air balloon, and a hot air balloon business. And he came upon the idea to like donate graves to paupers. And so and he wanted to help them too, but everyone that he donated got a little tax write off, because he was very smart about stuff like that. But, so it helped them and it helped him. So he died in 2009, and he was our first intentional green burial. And his daughter Christabel, we knew a little bit about home funerals and natural burial, but not very much. But his daughter went out and had the utter joy of going out to maybe Joann's or maybe Mike, someplace to buy the shroud. I mean, and it was such an experience for her. We didn't hire, somebody to come in and, wrap him up and, throw away the key to our hearts. We maintained the key to our hearts, and we took care of him ourselves. And shortly thereafter, we buried another dear friend, and we had our first home funeral with our clutch of friends. It was for the artist Andrea Burden, much loved visionary artist, very well known in Austin. And she died at age 40, completely unexpectedly. But she had all these people that just are these artists, musicians, singers, painters. We were all there at her death, around her hospital bed. And we didn't think about, even though Christabel and I already knew we had this cemetery, we hadn't really thought about offering it to everyone else. So when she passed, we went to her husband and we said, "We have a natural burial cemetery. Would you like for Andrea to be buried there?" And he was sitting on the floor in grief in the hospital waiting room, right? And he looked up at us with tears in his eyes. And he said, "Yes." But the thing is, nobody thinks, or many people don't think about, when someone is dying at a hospital, in a hospital bed, everybody's praying to God that that person rises again, that
Right,
they're be healed.
right. Yeah, that's just not the reality.
No, but by the time people get to abode, people are ready to, they're ready to float off into the ethers. They're ready. Everybody's, maybe they are, maybe they aren't, but they know that's where they're going. So we didn't even think about what we're going to do with Andrea's body. But the truth is, when someone dies, it's like everybody goes, what do we do now? And the first thing is like, okay, where do we, what do we do? Let's just call a funeral home. And it's like, they call the first funeral home that is advertised to them a funeral home that is, I don't disparage funeral homes or funeral directors, but a lot of the funeral homes in San Antonio and all over the United States, they are owned by Service Corporation International. It's international, it's national, and that's not where a heart is. The funeral directors, they all have their hearts in the right places for the most part.
But it's a business like everything else.
Yeah, you call them, and suddenly you've relegated your loved one to just suddenly get, "Oh yeah, we'll come pick them up. We'll come pick them up."
And you provide something so much, it's just so different. You had mentioned going back to the ether, and how I see natural burials is really returning to the elements, feeding the trees and the little bugs in the dirt, and
Nourishments,
yeah, and
and
really honoring this body that we're in and letting all of the elements return back to the earth.
well, yeah, the nutrients, like, okay, so 6 feet under is like what we've always heard, and if you go 6 feet under, you're embalmed, right? And then you're put in a casket that, you know, and then you're put in a concrete vault. The body is still going to decompose, right? But because it's in, are you following me here? Because it's in a concrete vault, it's like a, with embalming, it's like a toxic soup. That's not the way we're supposed to go, not 6 feet under in where the soil is dead. So what we do is, for natural burial, we bury at 3 feet, and everything must be biodegradable. If someone wants to bury their Aunt Martha in her glasses and in her, I said, no, we're not. And here's why: because when she returns to Earth, all you're going to see are these freaking
Right, that's
glasses,
true.
and it's like, why? That's not Aunt Martha. That's the only thing that never fed. Okay, so at 3 feet, there's bugs, right? And there's and when I'm explaining this to families, I always start out with that. Remember that song when we were kids? It was kind of grisly and it was like, the worms crawl in, the worms crawl out, and it's like a freaky song. Remember how we all got scared by it? Well, that's what I sing to people. Just why not? If I can sing to them, why not, Natalie? I mean, you know that. You're a singer yourself.
Well, and I think it just sometimes you gotta have a little bit of that gallows humor, right? And
Oh,
just being
yeah.
able to look at this is what's happening. And from my limited understanding, embalming and putting people in concrete and this hardwood, and it kind of takes away, it sanitizes the experience in not a great way. And like you said, that's not the way that we were meant to die. I wonder if you can share a little bit more about embalming, because I think that is a misconception. People feel that they have to be embalmed in order to work with a funeral home, in order to be buried, that is number one, you call the funeral home, number two, your body's embalmed, number three, you go and to a service and pay your respects. Can you teach us a little bit about embalming and why it's not such a great idea?
That's such a that it's the American way of death. And it's been around ever since Civil War times when bodies of the warriors, the young men, the bodies were triaged in a by the first funeral directors, and they filled their precious bodies with arsenic, embalming fluid, and so that they can send the boys home to their families, right? And so that's how the boys got home without being, and that's what it was back then. And when Lincoln was assassinated, that's when it became a thing. The embalming became a thing because he was put on the funeral train and it made stops all the way back to his home in Illinois, right? And three funeral directors, traveled along with him, and they were just keeping the party going, with his makeup, and all of that.
Adjust his hat.
Fix him, and little dab here, and brush his hair. He had a beard, so maybe because I think hair grows more after I don't know. I've heard it does, but I think what happens is
The skin recedes. But I think you bring up a good point, because embalming was important if you wanted to preserve the body. And people wanted to have their boys come home, and so they could have a burial where they grew up. However, in today's culture, we may not need it as much as we used to, especially if there is a place like your Countryside Memorial Park where people can return to the earth in that way and have a different kind of burial.
the conventional funeral industry is a $15 billion a year industry. And the reason that everybody knows about conventional, or what they call traditional, it's not traditional burial. What we do is traditional. We do maverick burial. We do the real cowboy burials.
Back
If someone
to the
wants a cowboy
source.
burial, oh yeah. Or, we'll do just the most beautiful burials, however a family envisions it. I mean, instead of like somebody, a family or some foreigner like sending someone a full, $800 bouquets, because they can't be there or whatever. It's like, yeah, that can happen, I guess. But then those bouquets, they're full of that foam. That foam does not ever biodegrade, and they've got wire. And so when those are sent to our cemetery, I go, okay, they're here, but I want y'all to know that I'm not going to leave that set up there. I'm going to pull all those flowers out, and y'all can actually decorate with the flowers. So a family directed funeral, I invite the families to adorn the grave. There are components to a natural burial. The first component is the opening of the plot, right? And it's called opening. We've all heard the term OC, opening and close. Well, the opening is done by I work with an amazing team, and they come with their excavator and they open the plot. And then The family can decorate around the hole with flowers, and I guide them, but a lot of them have already like thought about it, and they all know what they're going to do. So I invite everybody to bring their own flowers, and not only to decorate prior to the service, but during the service, making a part of the service like they are holding a flower or a rose to their heart the entire time during the service, just imbuing it with their love and energy. And then anytime they want to, they can come and just lay the flower on the body of their loved one or afterwards. Now, when I say body, okay, it's like, what are you talking about? Are they just there? It's like, well, shrouding is the most beautiful thing, and some families, they want to shroud themselves. They want to shroud the body of their loved ones themselves, and if they don't know how to do that, well, Hinara will help them, or I will help them. I mean, it's a sacred thing.
It's a really sacred time. It's a time that I think that's also there's a big misconception that once someone dies, that we can't touch the body or we can't be with the body. But you are saying something quite different, that there is a sacredness to bathing, to shrouding, to anointing with essential oils and flowers. I wonder if you could share an example of maybe a family member or someone who laid their loved one to rest at Countryside Memorial Park who might have had their minds blown a little bit by the possibilities that you offered them.
Oh yeah, every family has had their minds blown, especially people that have never even heard of natural burial. Like a couple of years ago, this beautiful young woman, she was in her 40s, came to the cemetery and she was very ill. She came with her partner. She said, "Look, I'm gonna die. My illness is terminal." And I just saw that she was just this remarkably sweet human being. And it was in the spring, and she was wading through the wildflowers, and she said, "I don't even want to step on these flowers. They're just so beautiful." But there was a sadness to her because she knew she was picking out her grave, her future burial plot. And I said, "Well, it's time for you to walk around." And she walked around with her partner, and when she came back from her walkabout on the cemetery grounds, the first thing she said was, "I can't wait to be buried here." I mean, she was like so overjoyed about, because everyone wants to know where they're really going to be and how they really are going to be taken care of. Now, natural burial is not for everybody, and not for every family. So anyway, when she passed, I guess a year and a half later, I didn't know she was a NASA rocket scientist. And her, her friends came and they were all NASA rocket scientists. They had never heard about natural burial. And I counseled them. I led them into, okay, this is what y'all can do. And they had the most beautiful burial. And I'm a carver. I carve people's gravestones. I'm an artisan, so it's like, okay, that makes it even juicier for me, because I can make the cemetery as aesthetically pleasing as we like. So I had already talked to her prior to her death. Okay, what would you like on your stone? She said, "Well, I love mountains and I love stars. I love space." So, what she got on her stone was a mountain scene with a quasar.
Ooh. How has this, being in this field and being in death work, how has that changed your outlook on life? And how has it shown you, what's really important in life?
I had my first home funeral in 2009, and it changed my life. We were able to take care of as I mentioned earlier, of our 40-year-old friend. And it was a group of artists, singers, musicians, painters. And so we washed her. We put her in a raiment. We did her makeup as we all knew that she did. She was known for her olive skin. Her Mediterranean, her complexion was the most beautiful thing that anyone had ever. I mean, she was that was one of the things she was famous for on top of being a legendary artist. So, but those of us that were with her at the moment of death, we watched all that color leave her face and become alabaster. I mean, her skin became alabaster. And we're going, and then suddenly all of her color came back in. It's like, wow, it was the most mystical thing. So we were going to have her home funeral, which was we were preparing her body at her home. We had her body taken home, and her body had been refrigerated for 3 days. And so she was in a body bag. It was our first experience with that. So her home funeral, she'd been in the body bag. And we didn't know what her skin was going to look like because she'd been dead a few days, right? Now, mind you, she was one of the most magical people on the planet. So when we unzipped the body bag, we didn't know what to. When we unzipped it, she was the most beautiful we'd ever seen her. It's like, oh my God. So, home funerals, you're always totally present with that being, and that's your time to just love them. Just love them and care for them because it's a gift that they can never repay, nor would they want to. It's like, oh, we finally get to lay our hands on this beautiful form.
Oh my gosh, what a beautiful picture you paint. And I think that's the wonderful thing about these home funerals is that it gives loved ones and family members a chance to be with their beloved. There's no rush. It's just the present moment. It's being with nature when you take them then out to the green burial site. Like it just sounds so ideal. But I'm sure that there have been challenges, as you're trying to educate people about this. And I wonder if you can share with our listeners and our viewers some of the challenges that you faced in this movement that you're doing in the green burial world.
So recently, a woman that I mean, I got the call and they wanted to meet Hinaro too because he takes care of the body, right? And the woman had just died. So anyway, Hinaro came and I came to meet with this gentleman and her family. He said, yes, she wanted a natural burial and this is where she should be. And he said, but can we plant a tree on her? And I said, I'm sorry, you cannot because I've got 20 live oaks that I planted out here. And those trees require a lot of care. And I've got 18 crepe myrtles on the inner peripheral of the cemetery. I mean, but you cannot plant a tree on her because you are not going to come here 3 times a week to water that tree. And besides, we've already got plenty of trees, and he didn't know what to do with that information. So he left. It's like he didn't understand it because he wasn't ready to understand it. All he knew was, yeah, honey, when I die, natural burial and plant a tree on top of me. He'd never thought any more about that. And since we said no, he's like, oh, what do I do?
Ultimately, people have the choice and the right to make whatever choice they want about how they want their body treated after they die. But I love that this exists and this vision, especially this time of year, Sunny, with the wildflowers and just all of the nature. It's such a beautiful place to come home.
Yeah.
Well, I want to find out a little bit more about how you take care of yourself and how you fill your cup while you're doing this work for others.
I love nature, and I have some new pets. They're wild, but they're now letting me pet them. They're two ducks that live on our pond, but they want me to feed them all the time, and they've already attended 2 funerals. And I think, oh no, the ducks are gonna bother them, but it's like the ducks, it's like they go to the funeral, and they get noticed, and then the adults are tapping the kids, look honey, the ducks. And pretty soon they're all looking at the ducks, and they're taking pictures. And then I'm thinking, well, come on ducks. So the ducks will waddle back to me, and I'll feed them, but they're following me. I can pet them now, and so we have ducks.
So much nature. And I think that just fits in so well with what you do too, that you can surround yourself with these animals and with nature. Um, Sunny, how can people find you online? How can they read more about the work that you do?
Well, they can go to our website, countrysidememorialpark.com.
Great. Last question, Sunny. What do you want to do before you go?
This is the first thing that came up. I want to ride a mule at Big Ben.
Okay. You embrace life in such a beautiful way, and you can tell the compassion and joy that you bring. I want to invite all of our listeners and all of our viewers to come schedule a visit with you. We're going to be bringing our doula students out again in a couple weeks. So, gosh, we'll put information in the show notes so that people know how to schedule a visit, because it's kind of like a abode in a way, where it's a feeling. And when you go into this sacred space that you've created, it's certainly a beautiful feeling. And so I can't wait for our field trip and to see it in person again.
And people can, like, when you are having your field trip, we can have innocent bystanders, and this is anybody listening, by the way, and they can just observe what's going on, because Hinaro and I are giving a master class in natural burial, in the actual event of natural burial. So, and we're giving that to the doulas, because doulas need to know what alternatives are so they can offer them to the family. But everybody needs to know.
The invitation is out there, everyone. Take
Invitation is open.
advantage.
Yeah, the door is
The
open.
door is open. Sunny, thank you so much for your time and your wonderful stories. It was such a joy speaking with you.
My joy. Thank you.
This episode is brought to you by Abode's Death Cafe. Our objective is to increase awareness of death with a view to helping people make the most of their finite lives. To learn more about Death Cafe, go to abodehome.org. Doesn't that sound like a place you want to be buried in? I mean, my goodness, when the first time I took a tour of Countryside Memorial Park, I was in awe. It was spring and the wildflowers were everywhere, and it just seemed like such a peaceful place to go. And I could just imagine my loved ones having picnics and celebrating me years after I had passed. And just the whole story, the whole image that brought up in my mind just gave me a lot of peace. And I really wish that for people. And as a death doula and as a host of this podcast, I want people to know that there are options, that you have the choice to make these options known. And that if you want to be buried in a field of wildflowers, then make those plans now. Get a tour of Countryside Memorial Park, pick out your plot, and make the plans now. And that's something I definitely will do before I go. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for joining us for this episode of Before You Go, the official podcast of Abode Contemplative Care for the Dying. At Abode, we believe death is not a medical event, and we are not medical professionals. We're just sharing our opinions, and these opinions shouldn't be taken as medical advice. You can find us online on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. This episode was edited by Make Your Day Richer.